So let's talk about weaving. Weaving is everywhere, but do you know the difference between weaving and knitting? Knitting is loops of yarn or thread, and it would be what t-shirts are made of. It's stretchy. It's t-shirts or sweaters. Weaving is different. Weaving is done on a grid, kind of like window screen. If you think about window screen, how stiff that is. The process is starting with thread stretched tight. Well, let's look at this loom. All weaving has to start with what we call a warp. And the warp are the first threads, and you can see them on here stretched tight. And they have to be tight or you can't weave. I am going to tighten up this warp so that we can weave on it. And because that's tension, right? You have to have tension to work with threads. How it works is when the warp goes on, it has to be threaded. So to thread the warp through these heddles, there's an eye, kind of like a needle's eye, and you have to put everyone through in a nice neat order. Everything has to be orderly with the loom or things get crossed up and you can't weave. I have 4 of these, what we call shafts. There's 4 of them, and they all have these heddles. So there might be 400 heddles on here right now. So treadles, again, it's a wonderful innovation. You don't have to do everything by hand. Your feet can do part of the work. So I can pick out treadles that will lift a couple of these shafts. So if I push 2 treadles down, they lift 2 of these shafts. I've got 4, and they're going to lift half of the threads up. And it kind of leaves a space in here between them. And actually you can see that here. We call that a shed. And that's where your shuttle is going to go. So a shuttle is a great little tool, and the shuttle holds the bobbin, and the bobbin holds the thread. So I'm going to show you how it actually works. This part of the loom is called the reed and the beater. The reed sits inside of the beater. You have to press your threads together to create the cloth. Now, depending on what you're beading, are you making a towel, are you making a rug, are you making something soft? Actually, you're not finished when you take this off the loom. It has to be washed. No matter what you make, has to be washed. So now you have to take into consideration, is there going to be shrinkage? Do you want it to shrink? Do you want to leave spaces? So if I were making like a baby blanket that was going to get washed later, I would want to beat that very gently. I would just want to be basically pressing the threads together. And that would leave little spaces where I could see the warp behind it. But if I'm making something like a rug or a towel perhaps, then I'm going to want to give it a good whack, okay? It just depends what you want to make. You can make whatever you want, you just have to use the right technique, and you have to figure out how many threads you need. There's a lot of math to setting up a loom, and it's actually enjoyable when you finally get the project figured out and you sit down and you measure your warp out and you start putting things on the loom, and it's just all good.